Hello, everybody. Good morning to you. It is 9 o'clock on Sunday. Justin and Lizzie here are live for Turning Towards Life, and we are very grateful to be here, as always. And we have a wonderful source today from Justin, a beautiful piece by Mary Oliver, and we're going to get into that very shortly. But we thought just to begin with today, we might do a little centering meditation for each of us so that we get a chance to, in these strange times. So we're in March 2020 and the world is in a very unprecedented place with this virus called COVID-19 flying around our planet and having massive consequences. And so for me and Justin, and for anybody listening, this is a chance also to come back home to ourselves, and amidst whatever tensions, fears, worries, experiences that are unusual and difficult to have, we get to center together and be together here. So we thought we would do a little centering exercise before we get into this lovely piece by Mary Oliver, and maybe it will have us receive it in a slightly different way as well. So I want to invite you, wherever you are, if you're sitting down and you can close your eyes, to close your eyes. Maybe if you're moving, you can just follow the instructions but not have your eyes closed. So as you sit or stand, just taking a minute to feel our feet on the floor and any point on us that is touching anything, like our bums on the chair, maybe our hands touching one another, our lips are touching one another. And just take a minute to breathe, becoming conscious of the breath and seeing if we can make the out breath just slightly longer than the in breath. And as that happens, see if we can sink down and acknowledge our connection through gravity to this earth, to the place where we are right now. And just notice that we are held where we are by the forces of nature that govern our world. And our breath can deepen a little more, noticing what it feels like for breath to pass through our nostrils, past our lips, and also the sensations of how the breath moves in our bodies into our lungs, expanding our rib cages, and then falling again. And as we become present, we can soften our bodies, soften any tensions we might be able to feel in our shoulders, across our backs. Even in our chests, there may be tension. And see what we can do to soften, relax, and be in this very moment and nowhere else. And as thoughts come, we can let them pass like clouds in the sky and return to our breath whenever we need to. And maybe we can experience a kind of spaciousness that wasn't here before by becoming conscious of our breath and the bodies that we're in and the sensations that we're experiencing. And then we can acknowledge that this is always here for us. This opportunity to come home to our breath, to the body, to just what's here right now. And as we continue on and listen to this beautiful piece by Mary Oliver, we can see what we can do to keep returning to our breath and receive this beautiful piece of writing from a very gifted, kind, open, and generous soul that is Mary Oliver's soul. So, Justin, do you want to take it from here?
I do. Thank you, Lizzie. And good morning, everyone. Hello, everyone. So as always, you'll find the source on our Facebook page, or if you're listening later, you can come back and find it at turningtowards.life. And before I read it, a couple of things. One is just to say thank you, Lizzie. I think we're going to need what you just brought to us again and again and again over the coming weeks as circumstances change for so many of us around the world, as our capacity to move around on the planet, which we should already, I think, be diminishing as much as we possibly can, gets diminished as we face big questions about how we take care of ourselves, as we and other people we know get sick, which is going to happen. We're going to need to be able to return to something that feels solid and welcoming and supportive. And what you just brought us is such a reminder to me that it's always right here. We don't have to run far to get that. It's a very natural human capacity to return to ourselves. So I'm very grateful for that. And then this source for this week's Turning Towards Life, I need to say thank you to our very dear friend Sophie, who brought this to us. Very grateful to have seen this. I know you've been reading Mary Oliver for a long time, Lizzie, and I have too, and I'd never seen this before. I don't know what part of her work it comes from, and it's called Don't Hesitate. Don't hesitate. If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give in to it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb.
If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give in to it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb.
I was so glad for this when Sophie sent it my way. And one of the things I love about Mary Oliver's writing is her truthfulness. So I've been very aware, Lizzie, as we've been choosing, this has been true throughout the entire 2 and almost a half years of our taking up this practice together, and it's never been more true now, that what we've been trying to do is to try and find sources that are true, and then to have a true conversation that comes from it, something that leaves nothing out. And in this time of great uncertainty and great suffering, I mean, there has been great suffering in the world always. And great suffering was happening before this came along. And then there are some new kinds of suffering in the world alongside the suffering that's there. I'm deeply appreciative for Mary Oliver's pointing to that we're always on the edge of loss, and that this situation doesn't change that. It magnifies it. It brings it in very close. But what it also does is this is what I'm finding, is that it's the most extraordinary reminder of what else we humans can be for one another. That I'm starting to notice all kinds of ways in which whatever way of living I've had so far, and whatever practices I've had so far, and whatever relationships I've had so far, still all the places in which I've been blind to joy and love and the straightforwardness of being in the world. So I'll give you one example. As many people have been doing this. So Davina, who I'm married to, her mum lives across the road from us and falls into the category of people who really need to stay out of the way of this virus. So for a week now, we haven't seen her in person, apart from taking food to her door and handing it across. And we've been having dinner together every night over Zoom, over this platform that we're using to get Turning Towards Life out into the world. And we have had the most glorious time. We've had conversations like we've never had before. We've had a kind of intimacy like we've never had before. We've had a openness to one another and a truthfulness with one another that we've never had before. And it's not come because we're sitting around the dinner table cowering in fear, though sometimes all of us have felt afraid. It's the other part of this. It's what Mary Oliver says about when we suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy and allow ourselves not to hesitate, not to go, oh, we shouldn't have this. So it's one of like 100 examples. But the other example that I want to give, because it you'll know this, Lizzie. So I am very actively a member of a synagogue community, a Jewish community, and we come together every Friday night and Saturday morning for the practice of being together and praying and singing together, all of that. And it's been very important to me for a very long time. And this week, for the first time in the entire history of the community, like many communities, we moved the whole thing onto Zoom. The building was empty. We weren't together. And it was terribly sad. We all cried a lot. And it was terribly beautiful to all be together in this way. Amazing to be together this way. And I realized that there were lots of small things that I have had complaints about. Oh, I don't like this about how we do it, or I don't like that, or I prefer this service to that service, or I like it when we whatever. And actually right now, all I just feel is tremendous gratitude and joy that it's possible to be together. So this is the part that I'm trying to get into. At least my experience of this is starting to notice how much in life I've been contracted around, holding on to, trying to have life go a different way, often very small things like preferences I have or complaints I have. And I can see right now how irrelevant they are in the face of what Mary Oliver says, that there are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be, and that there is a way that life brings itself into the middle of things, and it starts with love. Mm-hmm. And what is important is in micro ways. It's actually the micro ways that I'm noticing, the micro ways that what's important is reorganizing itself. Mm. Her words bring those very, very close to me and have me looking for joy and love everywhere and finding it everywhere.
Yeah, I have a similar feeling at the moment to seek this out because it feels like I could be subsumed, and I am at times subsumed into my catastrophic thinking mind of all of the ways everything could go wrong. And that's where my neurosis tends to be, is like I futurize and disasterize simultaneously, and I have to find a way of mitigating for that, like to self-regulating, because it turns my body very, very shaky, and it feels really, really horrible. And I know that it's not good for my health to be that way, and for good for my mental state and everything. And so this invitation to notice that at any point everything can be going on, but this is still here, feels like such a matter of widening our consciousness in any one moment, to know that this is also here. Like, that feels so important right now. And actually, for me as a person, this is really what I'm made of. Like I know my naturalist tendency is to joy, and to finding this plentiful opposite of a crumb feeling of what it means to be alive and to be human. And there have been times in the last weeks where all of that feels like it's collapsed into like a very, very small, frightened place. And I feel like this piece of writing by Mary Olive is so validating of the value of joy as well, that it has an inherent, plentiful, allowable beauty to it that is such a big part of what it is to be human, that this kind of joy makes everything like it's so valuable that it can outweigh other things. It's so plentiful, it's so possible. And of course it's really hard sometimes to access that, but when it's there, I love the fact that she says that you can give into it, that you don't have to go, oh well, I can only be that happy, or I can only be that joyful, I can only be that effervescent. But that there's a way that she's saying, because of its plenty, we can relax into it and allow it. And I know I've spent lots of time as well studying where I feel like there should be limitations on this. Like, well, I can't have that much goodness or that much happiness because I should be thinking about the virus, or I should be thinking about our financial situation, I should be thinking about. And it feels like there's a naturalness to joy that is so helpful in all of those realms. Like, it's not like I'm going to start ignoring all the things, but I can let joy be present as an and then it has everything be less dark and less frightening and less constricted, because I let it be there as well. And just like you were saying about going on Zoom with your community, yes, it's really sad, and that has its place entirely, and it's important to feel sad, but it's not the only thing that's there. And so there's beauty in all kinds of things. There's joy in all kinds of things that we think are the places where it doesn't exist. And I feel like this is like a little bit like doing our little centering meditation at the beginning of this. There is also a way of tuning into joy, of kind of cultivating it and allowing it to be there. And the way I'm finding my way into it these days is the blossoms and the flowers. And Justin, I texted you loads of pictures of all the flowers. I went for a walk, and spring is springing, and it's beautiful, even on like the bushes, the way the greens of the bushes are. And in some way, this general feeling of difficulty is pushing me to look closer, to wonder more about the blossoms and the timings, and how long it takes the magnolia leaves to fall off the tree, and it just feels like I'm being encouraged, because it's really hard. I'm being encouraged towards the joy, and that's the gift in it. And of course, I would rather this wasn't happening. And am I going to be in this with any kind of grace, or am I going to just be a wreck? And is being a wreck even helpful? I don't think it is. I think being graceful and welcoming and accepting is probably a far healthier for everybody, not just me, way, in terms of the people around me and how I am as a mom, how I am as a wife and a friend and family member, all that stuff. If I can find my own center and joy helps me do that, it has to be a good thing.
Strikes me that one of the very important aspects of joy is that it's not the same thing as happiness, and it's not the same thing as optimism. I love that Mary Oliver says, there's a whole load of destruction happening. We're not wise. We're not very often kind. Much can never be redeemed, and yet. So it's one of the things I've noticed in myself at various times, and also noticed in the way that other people are talking about this crisis, is a kind of splitting, which is a kind of denial, really, it seems to me, of our own presence and our own capacity. And the splitting goes either this is the end of the world and we're all going to disappear, which isn't the truth, or it's being terribly exaggerated and everyone just needs to get a bit more sensible and not believe the media. And there's lots to say about fear and the media and all of those kind of things, about the sort of epidemic of fear that's going on as well. And that's not what I'm intending to say something about here. That what I want to say is, it seems to me that the possibility of being open to joy is part of what comes with when we let ourselves be real and let ourselves be affected. So we can let ourselves be affected by the sadness and the fear and the anguish of all the suffering that's far away and might come close in, at all of the constraints on us, at all the things that might happen. We can let ourselves feel that. But if we'll really let ourselves feel that, then we might find ourselves in this position that Mary Oliver says, that we might find ourselves suddenly and unexpectedly feeling joy. So it's less a sort of, the way I'm experiencing is this less a sort of grasping for, I'll try and make myself feel better, as opposed to something that you're saying very, I think, very clearly and very beautifully and invitingly, both in the centering that you did with us earlier and in what you just said now, that it's more like, can we learn to look? Can we learn to receive? So that's why I said, when we gathered as a community, some hundreds of people online on Zoom the other night for the first time, not in the place that we used to be in, it was really sad and it was really joyful all at the same time, because they're the same thing. The sadness comes from the same root that the joy of being together comes. Just like when we open ourselves, we have a magnolia tree. In recent years, have fallen in love with magnolia trees, and the magnolias here in London, as you'll know, Lizzie, because you've been out seeing them as well, are all bursting into bloom at the moment. And that is still there in the midst of our difficulties. That for me is joy. That's what makes it joy, and not just like that's lovely or happiness. Because I often feel really tender when I'm feeling joy. It's not exactly the same as happiness. It's much wider. And so I think that what Mary Oliver says about it's not meant to be a crumb is so important. And I think this is what you were pointing to, is that when we find access to it, it doesn't help to contract at that point, to go, no, I shouldn't have this. This is a bodily thing. This is why I think the centering you did with us so mattered, that what's really called for now is our seeing, when we're in an emergency and we have to run to get help, that's a really good time for our bodies to go, go. Yeah. But every other time when we don't need to be in emergency mobilization, and we don't need to be frozen, seeing what we can do to practice opening so that our sadness and our joy can be here all at the same time. I think that is such a part of what's called for. And if we can learn that over these coming weeks and months, we might also have a chance on the other side of not just trying to put together the crazy world that we've been in, put it back together the way it was. We might have a chance of making some decisions about how we put our lives and one another, our relationships and our practices and what's important back together in a different way, because we didn't keep on clinging on so tight.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really important thing. It feels like it's hard to find the words, but if I could make my way through this time in contact with joyfulness, as well as acknowledging everything and practicing the way I need to protect myself, other people, all the stuff, just, I can be conscientious and cultivate joy, who I will become is a really different person because of it than if I just wait for it to finish, stay tense. It's like I think we have to create the space to let this change us and be willing to be changed by it. I think we talked about this a lot when I talked about being changed by becoming a mum. Like, can I let my little one change me rather than try and get back to normal again? And in a sense, something else is being born in the world right now. We're in a birth process, if you like. Something other than what's been here is here, and a load of other stuff that's going to be born in us will be present through all of this. It will be keep being born. And I really feel in this moment, just when you said that last thing, Justin, that who we become because of this, and of course becoming doesn't end, there's no end point to becoming, but we will be changed by this. And if I could be changed through joy as well as the suffering that inevitably I will be witnessing, I might have a small piece of suffering myself, I might get ill, my parents might get ill, that all kinds of things might happen, and I do feel afraid, but if I can remember that there's an and through this, then it's a piece of life that's not exiled from letting life itself infuse these days, these weeks, these months. And that has a place, that's so important, for us not to come out of our homes after however long being completely miserable, ragged and depressed is really important. And if I could emerge having been through a process that has joy in it as well as all of the other stuff, as you're saying, I might be useful rather than something else. I might be able to contribute rather than have such a need that that I can't build a new world that would be helpful to us all and play my part in that.
I think the language of "and" here, Lizzie, is really important. When you were talking about feeling afraid, and you were talking about suffering, and I know people, maybe I know you do too. We both know people who are on the front line of the medical care that's called for now, and we know already here in London we're really in the early days of this, and we know already that things are already really hard, and that it's more than people can really take in one way, and that people are dying already who wouldn't ordinarily be dying. And maybe I know families already who have had loved ones taken from them just in the last week by this. So our grief and our fear and our strength and our love and our joy and everything, they are all called for here. And that joy is not, this thing that really hit me so much from what you just said, was that joy is not an antidote or a cover up or a running away or a let's pretend it's all right. That joy is part of, allowing joy where it exists is part of the breadth and depth of response to this situation that's called for. I was really moved by what you said, that where you're pointing to, that this has got a lot to do with our cultivating the capacity to be ones who can respond both now and as the new world, the afterworld, gets born, which of course it's already getting born. And that's why we often find that sort of as we get to this point, we're sort of coming towards the end of our time, that we often find ourselves talking about practice. Because this is a practice, I know, not just for us, but for many other people who are with us. I'm thinking of all the people who sit in bed watching and listening to this conversation in the morning, or take us on their phone to listen to us before they start work, or that this is really a time for us having practices, for not just sort of mindlessly, reactively going through this situation. It really helps to be intentional in having practices that will get us in contact with the fullness of it and not just part of it. And I know that that's what we're doing here, which is why I'm so glad. It's one of the many reasons I'm so glad that we get to do it.
Me too. It's very beautiful, and I love this note that we're finishing on of the and. Just letting it all be here, and noticing that joy has just as much value as sadness or anything else, and letting it all arise as it wants to, and also being aware that we have some agency as well to tune into what's also here. If we are in the doldrums, like I frequently find myself, that I can find joy, and it's allowed to be here too. And I know for me, the joy mostly comes, as Mary Oliver's saying, through love, through connection, through my allowing myself to be affected by the people in my life, by the blossoms in my street, by very simple things. Just by the meditation that we did at the beginning, I can feel something arising when I get present to my body, to my sensations, to my breath, that isn't my catastrophizing mind. And that feels like a very supportive gift to keep cultivating, to keep conscious of, to keep practicing. And I'm very grateful to be doing that here, so that it's I can listen back to this, This is the thing, like we say this to each other often, don't we, Justin, that when we're feeling really bad, we listen to Turning Towards Light. Which is quite ridiculous, but it's true.
It's true.
We've both done it. We both do it.
Yeah.
And it is a real gift. And thank you everybody for being with us in this, because in a way, that setup that you're here with us has us keep on and keep deriving joy and keep feeling connected to the world through doing this. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to end with two things. One is to say, if you're listening to us and you haven't joined our Facebook group yet, just to let you know that it's there. It's a great way of being in another kind of conversation with other people, and you're so welcome to come and join us. You can search for us, Turning Towards Life, on Facebook, or you can always find all the resources and everything at turningtowards.life, including how to get into the Facebook group. But I also wanted to say, if you're not in the Facebook group, you might not have seen yet that with our very, very dear friends and partners at Thirdspace, we're starting a weekly practice called Turning Towards One Another, which happens on a Wednesday night UK time, 6:30 p.m. And it's a chance to come and be in conversation with one another. It's a large Zoom group. It lasts an hour. We did the first one last week and it was rather wonderful and really called for at this time. So you can find that if you're interested at the Thirdspace website. So we are thirdspace.org. And then on the top of the website is a menu item called Wisdom Offerings. And if you click on there, you'll see Turning Towards Life. And underneath, you'll see Turning Towards One Another. And all the details about how to join us are there. So we really will welcome you this week or any week on a Wednesday. We're going for a while, maybe a long time with that practice. Thank you again, Lizzie, and thank you everyone for being with us. And we're keeping going. So all being well, we will be back next Sunday morning at the same time, and we'll really look forward to joining you and you joining us there. Bye, everyone.